Alright. Video from Lost in the Woods. Cool. Not super lost. Not very lost. Just lost enough to be fun. The fun kind of lost. Hopefully. Yeah. Every once in a while, get this deep uncertainty. Describe it as kind of collapsing identity. I've recently learned a little bit about bipolar disorder. Not sure if I have it. Not necessarily confident enough to say that. Not confident enough to say much when the identity starts collapsing, right? But apparently, generally speaking, when you're on the high side, right, because it's manic and then it's depressive, when you're on the high side, the manic side, you just feel so confident. You feel more you than you've ever been. And I think during that stage, every opinion I have, every belief that I believe in becomes very definitely true, very well defined. I have a lot of faith in science and facts in that stage. I feel as though I've read and engaged with sufficient facts to come to a conclusion, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to assess the facts, and once you feel you've assessed the best facts that are out there, the best facts that make themselves available to you, and you feel like you have objective truth on your side, then you can stop thinking and come to a conclusion. Of course, my problem is twofold. One, I'm addicted to thinking. So the idea of, I have enough facts, I can have a conclusion and stop thinking now. Most people, their brain naturally wants them to do that because thinking is hard and they have to put effort into it and they don't want to think. Me, I'm addicted to thinking. It's an addiction. I can't stop. So if I do have enough evidence to come to a conclusion, my brain goes, whew, and it takes a deep breath and then says, all right, let's find reasons why what you believe is false now, actually. Let's play devil's advocate into eternity. And so when you're in the high stage, right, you're not going to do the devil's advocate so much. You feel like you've seen a good bunch of evidence, you've seen the science and the facts, and you know what's true and you know what's real. And then you go down towards more the low stage, the more depressive parts of things, and you start being like, who comes up with these facts anyways? You know, who's in charge of this fact machine I got these ideas from? You know, have I actually read the climate studies? Or did somebody just say really loudly and angrily to me at one point that, like, climate change is very strongly it's hard soil scientific evidence? And then I went, okay, well, you know, if it's hard soil, then I guess I'd be an idiot to doubt it. I'm no scientist, so I'll take your word for it. And does that mean that it's not true? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's the problem. That's the problem I'm at. Is I maybe lack the attention span. Ultimately, it's a me problem. It's always a me problem. Ultimately, I ultimately lack the attention span and expertise relevant to determine what reality is. And I know that, and so I'm in this like you know, when you don't know enough about a subject, so you're like, hey, I defer to somebody who knows more than me. But I've seen what happens when you defer to someone who knows more than you. I've seen how how much power that gives them to control the narrative. And I think a lot of people, they defer power, they defer this knowledge to someone who knows more than them. And as a result, they get tricked, they get got. They get got by various forms of propaganda. It's either corporations or government or some group or another has some kind of a propaganda out there, some kind of an ideology, and they're more committed. They're more committed to shaping truth than you are sitting on your couch wondering what the world is like. So they beat you out. They beat you out. But then, the high comes back. And when the high comes back and the identity, oh, hey, I know where I am now. Somewhat. I think I know where I am now. When the high comes back, if I don't get attacked by bears, your identity reformats. If I do, I guess it's going to be on camera, right? Because I'm talking on camera. And when the identity reforms and you have a stable self again, suddenly you're like, well, that was stupid of me. Why did I believe all that dumb shit? Why did I believe all that dumb shit before when I know what I believe? Oh, I'm gonna play devil's advocate all day long when I know who I am and I know what I believe. And I exacerbate it. I know I do. I'm like picking the scab of this cut that's trying to heal. But when have you ever not picked your scabs? Am I right? Am I right, people? Who has the willpower to not pick their scabs? I've never had that willpower, and I'm not starting today. So I reopened the wound really by listening to something political, engaging with something intelligent or intelligible, reading the back cover of a book which promises a subversive and intelligent political opinion on the inside of the book, but then obviously not having the attention span to actually read the book. So then I just have the vague outlines of the idea without the evidence for the idea. And so I start playing with the idea of believing the idea because it's a fun idea and it excites me. It's an exciting idea. But then, I can't go out and be like, oh, start spreading the news about this good idea. Because if anybody asks me any follow-up questions, I'm going to be like, honestly, I don't know all the details. I haven't read the book yet. I'm sure there were details in the book. I'm sure there were details. I'll get back to you on that if I ever develop the attention span to read, which I won't develop. That is the problem. Which makes me feel pretty silly because I'm engaging in a task that I'm not really built for. But what am I supposed to do? Not engage with tasks I'm not built for? I don't feel super built for any task. So I think the optimistic, self-helpy sort of push yourself approach is to engage with tasks that you're not built for in spite of yourself and hope that gradually you become more built for it and you overcome it over time as you learn more and so on and so forth. What was I conflicted about today? Let's talk about what I was conflicted about today, because it's never one thing. Term limits. That was a conflicting point. Let's stop here for a moment. Term limits. That was a point of conflict where, basically the debate about term limits falls on populist and technocratic lines, where the populists, they want term limits because they want the people, ordinary everyman, to be a stronger role in government. And they don't want they don't want their politicians to make enough money, because fuck politicians. Why should they make more money? They're probably corrupt, probably taking that money for corrupt reasons. So, given we don't trust them and they're corrupt, they shouldn't make much money. And they should be younger, because as Donald Trump once put it, not all experience is good experience. Yeah, they have more experience than me, but it's bad experience. It's bad experience. And so that's kind of the case for term limits, right? You cycle through people, because a term limit, all it is just you're not allowed to be holding office for too long. After a certain amount of time, they boot you out, they replace you with somebody new. And possibly, potentially, but not necessarily, fresh-faced and younger. I know it's this way, but I don't remember how I got over there last time. Let's follow this trail back. No, wait. No, there's something over here. This is the trail. Okay. Fresh-faced and possibly younger. So it's like good for people who want to fight the gerontocracy of old people in government. But then the technocrats, they hate it, right? Because their argument is we need the best people for the job. They might even argue that we need, more qualifications for government. Have you served, if you're in Congress, maybe, have you served in a lower office first? So, have you managed a town? They're thinking of it like a managerial position. Have you been in charge of a town before you're in charge of a state or a federal government? And so they would really, a technocrat would really, for example, hate Donald Trump. Oh, you don't like that noise? That's not good. I'm gonna hope that's a bird. Did not sound like a bird. Okay, we're gonna go up into the field over here. Ticks be damned. Because I want to live. Oh yeah, that's definitely something big. Okay. We're walking. We're not being hunted. Walking and walking. Definitely gonna get ticks after this. This is a go home and use a flea and tick shampoo shower. That's what this is. Definitely feeling a little bit prey-like right now. Not a great feeling. Please be near the observatory. That's what this is. This is my new horror AR game. It's not. It's me ranting about politics, except then I'm attacked by a scary monster or something. Yeah, so term limits, that's one of the conflicts. Because I think they both make sense, We want very qualified people, get paid a lot of money. Particularly, I have life experience with this now. I ran in New Hampshire. And weirdly, when you think of populism, you think of working class politics. At least I do. I think of socialist working class politics. But in this case, because I was working a full-time job, the fact that we have what's called a citizens legislature, they pay you literally $100 a year. It's basically a volunteer position. I think they only pay you that because there's probably some kind of a law saying they can't pay you nothing. $100 a year, and that's who runs our state government, is volunteer people. So I noticed a pattern, while I was out and about, that a lot of the people who run the state government are, they're ordinary people, but they're not really ordinary people. They're well-off people. They have, there was a stay-at-home dad, and then there was people who are retired, lots of much older people. So there's kind of a tragic irony there that, term limits kind of rubs up against this technocratic agenda of wanting to pay people more and have a very professionalized, holy fucking crap. Look at that fucking Thunderbird. Look at him. Ooh. It's a big motherfucker. Oh my god. I caught that on camera. Jesus. Yeah, so there's this sort of technocratic bent where you're trying to... What are they doing? Workout here? Professionalize the government service. Get people paid as much as possible. And make it into a real solid job position. Have higher qualification standards. And ironically, if they did professionalize it, it probably would have been a lot easier for me to actually hold office, because one of the things that I was running through in my head that I didn't fully know when I signed up to run was I was told it would take, there was a couple of days a month that I would be working. Couple of days a month. And I figured that was an exaggeration or something, but I figured it was a volunteer position. That kind of makes sense. I have to go through the fucking tall grass again? No, I can go around it. Okay. So a couple of days a month for a volunteer position that most people are doing on the side, that made sense to me. But then I was told that they do pay you. And then I was told, oh no, they pay you $100 a year. So I'm like, okay, back to a volunteer position. But it would have been nice if it were a full-time job, because I'm told by the people who actually do it that for them it's not a couple of days a month. It's a lot of meetings a month. It is closer to a full-time job. And of course it is. It should be. You're writing the laws for the state of New Hampshire. That should be a full-time job. And that's not something you do on a weekend. It shouldn't be. So there's this technocratic approach that I think makes a lot of sense from my life experience, that, you know, it should be a full-time job that people are really working hard at to get done. But I feel like there's a bit of a conflict there between that and the ideas of term limits. So I guess I'm feeling a little bit of like a death of idealism a little bit from real world experience there of but I'm not confident in it, because maybe you can have a sort of a middling position that gets the best of both worlds. That's what I try to do when it comes to technocracy and popular rule. Generally speaking, I try to strike some kind of a balance where I think that it should probably be a full-time job that you have to work hard at, but I want anybody to be able to have that job. At least I think so. I want them to be paid sufficiently, but not corrupt and not rich. And yeah, I guess that's about it. I guess I would just prefer average Joes working their ass off to what I would call elites doing barely anything. That would be nice. I guess that's not that controversial. Once you say it out loud, once you get a... See, now I'm starting to come back. So my positions are becoming a bit more definitive because I'm talking, and that brings the emotion levels back up. So the positions are starting to be a bit more definitive. That was the other thing. Listened to a debate about cultural appropriation. That was fun because they got in depth in the argument a little bit more than most people would. They really narrowed down their arguments. The argument really seemed to focus around one major conflict, and that was a philosophical conflict that exists in other contexts too. So it's interesting because once you start to realize what the sort of philosophical premises you're working with are, you realize that your position on an issue like cultural appropriation cannot be separated from your positions on several other political issues. So the debate was, can groups hold property, basically? Specifically ideas as property in this case. And there were a lot of allusions to Marvel and Disney as groups that do collectively own property. And the guy who was really arguing that cultural appropriation is like a societal wrong was really rooting his argument in the idea of, if we agree that there should be intellectual property from Marvel, that they should be able to own an idea like Iron Man or Spider-Man, and that they should, you can use that idea, but you have to pay royalties, you have to ask permission, you have to go to them. They basically argued if we can agree to that, then maybe if we don't want to enshrine it in law, but maybe we should have a cultural norm that behaves similarly to that legal norm enshrining the property of groups to their culture. That was the idea. And you can see there how that creates a conflict probably for a lot of people, because it is the political right that is typically against, talking about or caring about cultural appropriation, and they are the ones who typically care about property rights very strictly. Very strict property rights enforcement, right? Meanwhile, the political left, which is typically the group that wants to abolish intellectual property, amongst other things. I'm one of them. I don't like intellectual property. We find ourselves in the awkward position of having to be like, well, there's no such thing as owning an idea, except this idea, because it's the minority's idea. So there's a contradiction in there, really. Those contradictions, a lot of those contradictions, you'll hear them being pointed out by free market libertarians. They do a pretty good job of pointing out those kinds of ideological contradictions, because I think they have a solid principle to them, even though I'm not a fan of them. And I think that they have a concrete worldview and a concrete position is the thing. I guess I'm out of the woods. I'm gonna get eaten alive, hopefully. Yeah, so I think they have a concrete position, but their concrete position is obviously always liberty, which allows them to cut through those contradictions, right? So they're typically pro-choice, pro-gun, pro-drug decriminalization, and pro-sex work, right? So they get to kind of have this position where they look at the left, they look at the right, and they're like, well, the left wing wants to do gun control, the right wing wants to continue the war on drugs and continue criminalizing sex work. And they're like, obviously, we can't abide by either team because, when you criminalize something, it just drives it underground. And so they have this idea originating with Milton Friedman. He wrote an essay, I think it was called something like Free Markets versus Black Markets, or something like that. And the idea was basically just that it is better to have a market that is open and transparent and above ground than to have a market that is a black market that has been driven underground. And so he applies that across the board. And that argument, I think, has gotten really deep into people's consciousness. So much so that I think it's such an effective argument that when the left talks about drug decriminalization or sex work decriminalization, they use that argument. They use it for abortion, too. It's the same argument. In a free market, sure, maybe you're against abortion, but it would be safer abortions, right? And the right uses the same argument when they're talking about guns. Is that a real snake? Holy fuck, is that a real snake? Oh my god, it's a real fucking snake. Look at this, boys. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I called you boys, I don't know what you are. Internet strangers. Snake. Oh, that isn't a live snake. I feel bad now. Okay, I'm just gonna leave him be. I don't want to get eaten. Okay. That's kind of cool. It's a real bright belly on a snake there. I don't know what, he must have gotten hit or something. He's real upside down and only moving his tail. Whew.